Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this Field to Market webinar, introducing social mass balance, a quantifiable metric of social sustainability in agricultural supply chains. My name is Kelly Murray Young. I'm the Senior Director for Education and Inclusion at Field to Market, and I'm honored to be a part of this discussion today. Before we begin, we'll just put up Field to Market's antitrust statement that we show before every meeting. Even though the chat function is disabled on this call, we'd like to just remind you of the antitrust. Okay, so this webinar today is being recorded, and we will post it to the Field to Market website in the next few days. As a webinar, all attendees are muted and your video has been automatically turned off. We'll have time at the end for question and answers, so please enter those questions into the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll get to those at the end of the discussion. So before I turn it over to our presenters today, I wanted to share a little bit about Field to Market. There are a lot of people on this webinar today, and some of you are not Field to Market, representing Field to Market organizations. So Field to Market, we're the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture. We are a membership organization that comes together to collectively define, measure, and advance the sustainability of food, feed, fiber, and fuel production in the United States. And we recognize that there are three pillars to sustainability: the environmental aspect, or planet, the economic aspect, or profit, and the social aspect, or the people side. So as I mentioned, we are a member organization, and our members represent five sectors of the agricultural supply chain. We have our grower organizations, civil society, our affiliate sector, which is comprised of universities, government, and media. We have our agribusiness sector, which are companies that buy or sell from farmers, and our customer or consumer-facing brands and retail sector. Currently, we have over 190 members in Field to Market. We're all joined together to do this work together. Field to Market, we are committed to being quantitative in our approach. We're grounded in science. We're focused on outcomes. It's also important to know that we are technology neutral, no matter what type of production system. Could be conventional, organic, or any of the other types of agriculture we describe. We are agnostic to those technologies. So the core of Field to Market's work has been in measuring the environmental aspects, or the planet aspects, of sustainability. Our members came together to decide which are the most important environmental indicators. And so we have these 8 sustainability metrics: biodiversity, energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, irrigated water use, land use, soil conservation, soil carbon, and water quality. Growers, or somebody acting on a grower's behalf, can enter data into our FieldPrint platform. So the field characteristics, operations, management practices on the farm, to analyze that field's success in those 8 environmental indicators. You can access that calculator free online at www.calculator.fieldtomarket.org. You can go in there, enter a farm's data, or you can play with some demo fields that are in there, or growers can access the field platform analytics through one of our qualified data management partners. Many are very familiar there on their right. A few years ago, Field to Market began to address the financial or the economic aspects of sustainability. So we published a blueprints for the value chain. This is looking at 12 financial blueprints that include case studies for all supply chain partners to help support growers as they transition to more sustainable practices to catalyze a lasting and systemic change. And then more recently, as part of our 2022 to 2024 strategic plan, we pledged alongside of our membership to address the social aspects, to address and correct persistent systemic racism within the United States agricultural chain. And so our members decided together how we're going to accomplish this. One way is by putting historically underserved producers, particularly Black, Indigenous, or other producers of color, or BIPOC producers, at the center of our work to build trust within that supply chain. We're actively supporting work to advance the social aspects of sustainability in our projects and initiatives, and this is a big part of why we're doing this webinar today. We have pledged to assess our own implicit biases, both personally and as an organization, and take steps to correct them. And then again, this webinar gives us an opportunity to provide a venue for our members to share the lessons learned, share those best practices to support underserved growers and BIPOC colleagues. We'll have another webinar next month, October 11th, 2023. Mark your calendars. You can register there online. Our another member organization, Forum for the Future, Natasha Mehta, will be presenting a recent publication looking at the social outcomes in regenerative agriculture. It's looking at different approaches to addressing social outcomes, one of which is what will be shared today in this webinar. I'm really excited to introduce you to Seanicaa Edwards Herron. She's the founder and executive director of the Freedmen Heirs Foundation, a new member to Field to Market. And in a little bit, she will be joined by Cargill's Deanna Peterson. She works on their corporate responsibility and strategy. So thank you so much, Seanicaa, for being here today. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Don't forget, folks, you can enter your questions into the Q&A box. I'll come back on a little bit later to share those with our panelists today. So thank you so much. Up to you, Seanicaa. Oops.
Thank you, Kelly, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for joining into this webinar today. I'm very excited to speak with everyone about the social mass balance concept. As Kelly mentioned, I am Seanicaa Edwards Herron. I'm the founder and executive director of Freedmen Heirs Foundation, and today I will be sharing with you a new concept that we are very excited about called social mass balance. Before I jump into my presentation, I would like everyone to take a moment, and I would like for you to imagine an unbalanced scale. On one hand, you have the weight of systemic injustices, denied access to entry, discrimination, just a very negative construct around agriculture. On the other hand, I want you to imagine a group of farmers that are striving for equity, that are striving to maintain access to opportunities, access to capital, but are constantly being denied. This has been going on for over a century. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the plight of Black farmers. Nonetheless, the idea or the concept around social mass balance will help to bring equilibrium, and we'll get more into that as we talk through the presentation. I wanted to start off by providing some historical context. According to the last USDA Census of Agriculture, which was released in 2017, there are some very daunting statistics. The number of Black farmers in the United States as of 2017 was approximately 1.4%. If you're looking at absolute numbers, that's around 48, 49,000 Black farmers, as opposed to 14% 100 years ago. The total value of market goods sold is 1.4 billion in 2017. That is only about 0.04% of all farms, which, as you can see, was estimated at 388 billion. The decline in Black-owned farms is 96% at the top of the century, and the total number of acres lost from Black producers is over 12 million. So from a historical context, we can see that there needs to be in place a construct to help and to support Black farmers and underrepresented farmers in the United States, and more specifically, integration into the U.S. agricultural supply chain. But if we take it a step further, a study was conducted in 2021 by McKinsey & Company, and they utilized USDA data and were able to estimate that Black farmers are approximately 1.3 times more likely to generate a net loss. But on the other hand, they are almost 4 times less likely to utilize long-term contracts. So when you're thinking about farming in general, no farmer puts seeds in the ground to make a loss, and no farmer puts seed in the ground and not have a market outlet for it. So when you think about it holistically, those systemic barriers that have been put in place, they are actually working, and even over 100 years ago, they are keeping Black farmers from integrating fully into the supply chain, which is why we need something, a construct or a new concept that will help us right some of those injustices and wrongs that these producers have faced. Social mass balance is the key. Social mass balance will be a game changer, not only for Black farmers, but for all underrepresented and socially disadvantaged farmers when it comes to integration into the United States supply chain. So when thinking in terms of social mass balance, you may be wondering, well, what exactly is this? This is a new construct, but the basis of social mass balance is derived from the mass balance concept, which is a concept that is utilized currently across sustainability and even in some aspects of agriculture. From a very top level definition of mass balance, it's basically what goes in must come out. It has to be accounted for. Whatever goes into a system has to come out of that system. Social mass balance takes it several steps further and incorporates diversity, equity, and inclusion measures into sourcing, tracking the output of agricultural inputs in a system. So essentially what we're saying is that we want to look at the type of farmers that are integrated into the system. What are they growing? How are they growing it? What region of the country are they growing it in? All of these are social constructs that we need to make sure we are accounting for currently in the U.S. supply chain, because right now we're not doing a very good job of it. So how does this concept work? Number one, it starts with sourcing directly from Black farmers, sourcing directly from Black-owned farms. Number two, which is very important, is the integration piece. So with this integration, it's the Black farmer inputs or crops are integrated into the processing system with all other crops of the same quality and value. So we're not talking about segregation or identity preserved. We're talking about integrating. But what makes social mass balance so special is that during that integration, there will be detailed accounting of the product flow, meaning starting from the farm gate, again, where are these farmers located? How many Black farmers? What are they growing? What are the production numbers? and making sure that it is accounted for throughout the system. And then at the output is the equity piece, because the total percentage of the commodities sourced from Black farmers represents an aggregate value that's sourced equitably. So it goes back to what goes in must comes out. So if we think about this in a very realistic view, how would this work in the real world? I'll give two examples. The first one is if we're thinking about agribusinesses, wholesalers, retailers, they want to support Black farmers directly. Social mass balance will allow them to do that. They can purchase it in bulk. That's not to say that every item that is sourced has 20% that is attributed to Black farmers, but you know that every bulk load that is provided goes to support Black farmers directly. It can be traced, it can be tracked along the supply chain. Another example is, think about your favorite burger joint. You're a consumer, you want to eat hamburgers that have beef that's sourced from Black farmers directly. Your favorite burger chain also wants to support Black farmers. They can go to their supplier and say, hey, we want to purchase beef for our hamburger patties that are sourced from Black farmers. They can buy that beef in bulk. Now, when you go to your favorite hamburger spot, you're not going to be able to say, I know for certain that this patty is produced from beef that was raised by Black farmers. However, you will know that that bulk, the bulk level of beef that's provided to your favorite hamburger spot has been accounted for, and you know that those hamburgers have been sourced directly from Black farmers, and that what you're doing when you purchase your hamburger is supporting Black farmers. So it's not to say that every single item, we can't track every single component, but we can look at it as a percentage and know that those dollars are going directly to support Black farmers. So why is this needed? As I said at the top of the presentation, we haven't done a good job. The U.S. supply chain is very complex, but it hasn't done a good job of recognizing underrepresented and socially disadvantaged agricultural groups. So number one is that it provides opportunity. It opens the door to market access, and it increases economic viability and profitability, because now Black farmers have the benefit of being integrated into major agribusiness supply chains, as well as helping or being introduced to the concept of long-term contracts with agribusiness companies. Again, we're back to this integration piece. When you're looking at it from the side of the farmer, it creates a more inclusive, efficient, and equitable processing and supply chain. Diversity equals risk management or lowering your risk. So you have a more resilient supply chain. Not to mention, for Black producers, there is a lot of institutional knowledge that can be gleaned and garnered, because a lot of America's cash crops, that institutional knowledge lies with the African American farming community. And then lastly, what I like to term the demand factor. This concept will stimulate demand for more socially responsible and equitably sourced commodities from Black producers. So for a program like this, it's very important to understand the benefits. And social mass balance is mutually beneficial for the supply chain. And so when I say supply chain, I mean across the board, as well as farmers. So we're looking from the farm gate all the way to the consumers. These are 12 benefits that we at Freedmen Heirs have been able to identify. However, this list is not, all inclusive, but I'm not going to go through each and every one of these benefits. I'll just pick my top 3. Number one is the standardization. Right now, there's no standardization across supply diversity in the supply chain. And we need that so that we can make sure that we're accounting for and that the system is diverse, is equitable, and is inclusive of all producers. The next one would be diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is important because it brings a level of accountability, but typically in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, we always hear or read about the qualitative aspects of it. Social mass balance will allow for quantification. So real metrics that we can measure and that we can see and we can track progress across time. And then lastly, I would say market access. You are opening up market access for socially disadvantaged, underrepresented Black farmers as well. This can be applied to any other minority or ethnic group or even region of the country. But the access piece is key because that in turn is what brings economic viability, economic profitability, and in the long term, social sustainability as well. So this is looking at it from the standpoint of the supply chain. But what about the farmer? What about the people that are actually toiling the soil and looking at it from their perspective and being able to articulate to them why it's important? So the importance of integrating Black farmers. Before I go forward, I want us to think back to those statistics. Although they were very daunting, they're factual. They are what they are. But every one of the bullets that's listed here that we have identified in some form or fashion helps to offset that, helps to turn it around, address those systemic biases, the systemic discrimination that Black farmers have faced. All 9 of these. Again, this is not an exclusive list. This list, there are other benefits, but these are the top 9. And so again, I'll pick the top 3 from my perspective of why it's important. Number one, as that study indicated by McKinsey & Company, long-term contracts. Long-term contracts are vital to the sustainability of any farm. As you go to get farm loans or support with your farm, it's always encouraging to have a line item that shows that I have a dedicated source to where my product will be marketed. That shows positive cash flow on your income statement. Partnerships and collaborations. This helps bring the plight of Black farmers to the forefront with their partnerships and collaboration. And it also brings a level of advocacy and social justice. And then lastly, I would say market access is key. We want to make sure that these farmers have access to all different types of markets, various outlets, so that they can remain in business. Because again, we saw the statistics over the last 100 years or a little bit over 100 years, Black farmers have been, their farm numbers have declined 96%. So we want to make sure that we stop that, but then we get to a level where it's sustainable, but we can add and increase the number of Black farmers into supply chain as we are able to show that farming is becoming more equitable and Black farmers also have a piece of the puzzle, or they are an important link in the chain of the U.S. agricultural supply chain. And lastly, it's the right thing to do. Despite the integral role Black farmers have played in the history of American agriculture today, in 2023, they remain on the outside in the fringes. That is very discouraging, and it's a loss for Black agriculture, but it's also a loss for American agriculture and the overall success of the U.S. food systems and supply chains. A program of this caliber being new in concept, in order to be successful, we always have to think about the challenges and the potential solutions. This chart lays out some of the challenges that we have identified and serves as somewhat of a risk management plan for us to overcome some of those challenges, to make sure that adoption is a very viable idea for social mass balance. Number one, ensuring engagement. Outside market pressures is very important, because sometimes when we're thinking about agriculture, price is costs are very important. So when you're thinking about the costs and DEI initiatives, we want to make sure that it's not, I got to have one or the other, but it's more so I need to have both, and I need to figure out a way to make sure that I'm able to do that. Lack of transparency and availability. That's not necessarily on the side of the social mass balance, but for companies that don't want to be transparent, they're not fully bought into it. And so their levels of thinking about accountability aren't there yet. How can we make sure that we overcome that? Resistance to change. This is a new concept, and the agricultural supply system has been operating at a level for so long. Anytime something new comes out, you will always have that resistance. Data collection and standardization, especially now in this day and age of technology. How are we going to make sure that the data that is collected during the social mass balance concept or the pilots, how is it privacy being maintained? How is it being collected? How is it being stored? But I will say, for each and every one of these challenges, there are two common threads throughout. Number one is transparency, being transparent about with communication, being transparent with talking with producers, agribusinesses, retailers, wholesalers, everyone throughout the supply chain will help with overcoming some of that resistance to change and the lack of fully buying into what this concept can do for the supply chain. So I think in general, it's always great to look at these challenges head on and have solutions for them. And that's what we're showing here, is that this concept is fully thought through from the beginning to the end. So to give you an idea of what a roadmap could look like, currently we're in the pilot stage. We have been able to partner with Cargill to pilot the social mass balance for the next 2 years. And I'll let Deanna talk a little bit more about that. But thinking in terms of, we understand this is not a straight line. There's going to be some bumps, some crashes, some curves in the system. However, through reporting and transparency, scaling with increased collaboration across the supply chain and continuous improvement, we will see full adoption of social mass balance for the U.S. agricultural supply chain. Now, I didn't want to end the presentation with your normal conclusion slide, because even after this webinar is over, the work will continue. It's not a conclusion. But I wanted to end it with a call to action. Everyone that's on this webinar call, we fit into one of these boxes, or mostly two, and some of us even three. However, I want you to take time to think about where you are and to ask yourself the hard questions. For agribusinesses, and I use that term inclusively across the entire supply chain, audit your supply systems. Do you know how many diverse suppliers you have? Do you know how much you're sourcing from them? And if you don't, I would encourage you to reach out to me, reach out to our team, learn more about social mass balance and how it can be implemented. But also think about where you can incorporate more diversity into your supply chains. For consumers, demand products that include more diversity. Your buying power can push the needle, can move the needle. And then for everyone, we need to really hone in on lending our voice to make sure that we are advocating for policies that are equitable. And we need to continue to educate ourselves on the struggles and the historical context of what Black farmers have faced in this country. So at the beginning of the call, I asked everyone to talk about or to imagine the unbalanced scales, but now going through the process of what social mass balance is, what it can do for the US supply chain, I want you to envision now that the scales are balanced and what we can do going forward to make sure that those scales remain balanced. So now I will yield the floor to Deanna so that she can talk more with you all about Cargill and what they're doing to support Black farmers.
Thanks, Seneca. Thank you so much. And I'm Deanna Peterson. I lead social sustainability programs at Cargill, and I'm just thrilled to be partnering with Seneca and a host of other amazing Black-led organizations to address systemic inequality, but also to really move forward the work of Black farmers, ranchers, and growers, and to shine a light on the impressive work that they've been doing. What we know is that this is not an either or scenario, that the world needs more food, and that in order to supply that food, we need every farmer, rancher, and grower to be as productive as possible. And in order to do that, Cargill really looked deeply at its supply chain and understood that we had an opportunity both to include underrepresented producers, but also to help to work with those producers to maximize profitability, participation, and productivity. And so that's why we launched the Black Farmer Equity Initiative and why we're working with partners like Freedmen Heirs. For us, this is about possibility, and it's about meeting the growing global challenge of nourishing our rapidly expanding population. This is work that we've done for really centuries in investing in farmer livelihoods. And so this builds on that background. What I wanted to share with you today is just a little bit about why we're partnering with Seneca and Freedmen Heirs directly, because for us, this is really about shining a light on her and some of the work she's doing, and also the other NGO partners that we're working with. So we know that social mass balance is a new concept. And we are, as Seneca very rightly said, we are in pilot phase. And we're really excited about that because we think that Freedmen Heirs and the work that Seneca is doing is really innovative, and it's based on strong science. So what people didn't share about Seneca is that she's an agricultural economist with experience working at the USDA. So she's got this strong basis on facts and information. And she brings a deep understanding, having been raised in a working farm family, of the real challenges and potential barriers that Black producers face. So I am here really to shine a light on the work that she's doing and say to everyone, I know there are customers of Cargill's in the room, there are competitors. We are working to build a big tent around the Black Farmer Equity Initiative. And what I'd like you to invite all of you to do is to join us in this work. We know that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. And so I would like to invite all of you to bring what you have, because this is a big bet. Social mass balance is a big bet that we're making. It's a strategic bet because we know that customers and consumers are increasingly seeing the layered nature of both environmental and social sustainability, that those are deeply integrated, and that they are looking for products and for companies to support companies that have both a social and an environmental sustainability story to tell. And so we want to invite you into this work because we're going to go so much further if we can go together. And for us, this is work that is deeply entrenched in our values, but we want to partner with unlikely partners and with our customers to bring these solutions. And I would invite you not only to bring your grant making dollars and your your purchase power through buying the products of a social mass balance project, but I'd also invite you to bring your technical expertise, your networked assets. A lot of what we're thinking about are transportation solutions and things like that. There are practical barriers that we need to overcome, and we can only do that by working together. And so I hope you see this as really the forefront of a new industry-wide challenge for food and agriculture, and that you hear the call to be invited in to what can be a really positive and hope-filled story. This is not about, there are lots of gaps in the system, but this is a place where if we work together, we can really achieve rapid progress with really not a ton of effort or investment. Like we really can, we want you to invest deeply, but this is really possible, but we're gonna have to work together. And so we encourage you to bring your dollars, your people power, your technical insight into this work and join us as we work with Seanicaa on the social mass balance project. It's a big bet for all of us. We are on a learning journey as we do this work together, and we're going to hit barriers. It's not going to be a simple and straightforward path. We know that from other work we've done in this space. But what we know is if we have partners like you and like Freedmen Heirs, and we always focus on the voice and the truth of those who are on the front lines of this work, like Seanicaa, then we're going to be more effective together and we're going to see real progress. Cargill has been investing in the Black Farmer Equity Initiative since 2001. We've been proud to triple the level of investment, more than triple the level of investment that we've made with Black growers, ranchers, and suppliers across our US footprint. But we're not satisfied. We still have a lot of work to do. And so we're hopeful that through partnerships like this one, we'll be able to get to a more equitable agricultural economy together. So I just want to thank you for your time and attention, and especially thank Seanicaa for being at the forefront of this really important work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, go ahead, Kelly.
Well, thank you so much, Deanna and Seanicaa. I want to remind everybody to please submit your questions into the question and answer box in your screen. And we do have one question, and I think it's directed toward you, Deanna. First, the attendee wanted to thank both of you. And so the question is about how buy-in within Cargill was reached. You know, how did you get your internal stakeholders on board to support this work, especially with social mass balance?
Yeah, I think we've been really lucky to first be able to use really clear data to tell the story of this work, and then to be able to introduce our leaders to partners like Seanicaa and others who have really practical solutions and are really clear about where there are still unknowns and where there'll need to be help in terms of technical expertise and other things. So I think using data to drive decision making and really demonstrating the potential benefits. We've seen really great customer success stories in many of our businesses by partnering with customers to really drive this forward. And so that's been important. It's not always easy because frankly, the biggest challenge is just the level of demands that are made on our business leaders and thinking about sourcing. It's really hard to do this work and be on the front lines. We have great empathy for those who are working to buy grain across the US and do it on a least cost model, and make sure that the products and the food that we sell to many of you in the audience are affordable and high quality. So that's hard work. And so making this easy for our partners has been, or easier for our partners, has been also really important. We're really grateful for those business partners who have championed this work, because it isn't always easy.
That's great. We have another question for each of you. So Seanicaa, I'll ask you first. What does success look like for you? Where do you want to see this go in the next 9 months to a year?
Success for me, as the roadmap indicated, is full adoption by the agricultural supply chain. But if we break it down into small pieces, I would say the next 6 months, we're around, we're going into planting season. If we're looking at row crop producers, let's have as many Black row crop producers sign up directly to be integrated into Cargill's supply chain. We can start off at a baseline of, let's say, 35 to 40 Black farmers. At harvest time, the implementation of social mass balance will have its first iteration. We can provide case studies. We can say what worked, what didn't work. A year from now, I want to triple that number, and making sure that we're highlighting the successes and making sure we're continuing to generate that demand at the farm gate, but also at the consumer level.
That's great. And how about you, Deanna? What do you consider success in the next 9 months to a year?
I mean, Seneca's success is our success. So as always, Cargill's success is intimately linked to the success of all farmers. I would say we have really strong internal spend metrics that we communicate and talk about with our business leaders, and we are working to hit those spend metrics and come up with scenarios and really detailed actions that our business leaders can take so that we can hit those spend metrics. So we are really talking about bottom line investment in Black suppliers.
Great, thank you so much. Another one of our participants is wondering, Seneca, or perhaps Deanna, what crops or ingredients are good candidates for using social? I mean, is there a top one?
That's a great question. That is a great question. I would say all crops we're able to utilize it, but you have to tweak it based on what it is that you're looking to source. So the easiest, I would definitely say grain, because you have yield, you have acreage, you know what your production is going to be, easy calculations. You can also look at livestock and proteins. It's different because you're having animals born and slaughtered. The integration piece will be a little bit different, but it's applicable across all crops, commodities. It's the approach that would have to change. So starting off with Cargill right now, we're looking at grains. And then the next step would be able to expand into other categories across the different commodity groups.
Yeah, and I would just echo what Seneca said. I want to just highlight that on our website on cargill.com, if you search for Black Farmer Equity Initiative, we have a list of crops and a list of key geographies, but we really are developing a network of farmers across all of the US. And so are really interested in connecting with, if any of you know or are a Black supplier, really networking Black producers inside Cargill to get longer term contracts and dedicated buys it's really critical to all of this working. And so, so we have that list of crops and key states listed. I would say that I agree with Seneca that grains, and so soy, wheat, and corn are our biggest priorities today. We are also, though, for the last 3 years, we've been working on a protein supply chain, so beef and other protein sources, but it's going to take longer for all of the same reasons that Seneca just listed. We're working on it. So if anybody wants any of that, we can speed up by adding more people to our team.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So Seneca, a question for you. How do you think the social mass balance approach might change the mindset of Black farmers who have really faced, years of discrimination and have distrust for the system due to systemic racism?
I will start off by saying this. First and foremost, it's not a direct buy-in from Black farmers either, because of those very reasons. This is new, so there definitely has to be a mindset shift. But showing the potential benefits and what it could mean to addressing some of those historical wrongs, and for Black farmers to be able to see the implementation themselves, to be a part of this change, and knowing that there's benefit to their communities is going to be very key. But yeah, even where we are now, just because it's new doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get buy-in in the beginning. But we're hopeful because you have some producers that are a little bit apprehensive, but then you do have those very progressive producers that are excited and they're ready to get going and they want to see change and they want to be a part of that change.
Interesting. Another person in the audience was wondering, how might this help with beginning farmers that are kind of coming into the system?
That's a social metric. That is a social metric that can be quantified to say, hey, how long have you been farming? Or if you just want to look at it from the aspect of, we want to track and we want to know about new and beginning farmers. What are their experiences and how are we going to be able to support them? So absolutely, I think social mass balance is applicable there because it's a social metric that needs to be measured.
And so that's a really interesting and important point that we need to probably stress, is that right now we're talking about Black producers.
Right.
But the social mass balance approach can be applied to any demographic that you're interested in
Absolutely. It can be applied to different regions of the country because you have different crops grown in different regions, other ethnic groups that are socially disadvantaged and underrepresented. This can apply to those groups as well.
On that point, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of focus and why we are working with Seanicaa and others to focus on Black producers at this time. The reality is that we took a really fact-based look at our supply chain and saw that this was the area where we had the biggest opportunity. And I would encourage all of you, just as Seanicaa said, to look at your supplier diversity numbers and really be thoughtful about that. We also know from history and other case studies that have been developed, whether that be Coca-Cola or others, that as you focus on, as you widen the aperture of equity work, it can often, you run the risk of losing focus. Because what we know is the gaps and the specialty approaches that need to be taken. So the really intentional work that needs to be done is based on history and community and the details that we've learned by listening. And so when you take an equity-based approach and put the producer at the center, the approach that we take with Black producers will inherently be different than the approach we take with Indigenous producers or women producers or veterans. And so we are really working to focus. And then as we see the flywheel move, we will move. But we know that it really, like in this world where we're spoiled for choice in everything and there's way too much of everything, we've decided to be really focused and disciplined in the work.
And Kelly, I think it's also important to say or piggyback off of what Deanna just said in terms of, Black farmers. The historical piece is very important because the systems or the setup of U.S. agriculture as it is today and, even 100 years ago has been stacked against the Black producer. And I can't say with 100% certainty, but when you look at the supplier diversity, the number of Black producers is likely smaller or less than any other group when you're looking at the numbers from an absolute level. Making sure that we are focused, as Deanna said, on one group, and then working through this project or this pilot so that we're able to see successes. Because again, when you start diverting attention, you also lose the ability to see the full benefit of a success.
Thank you. Someone else in the group has asked really about how can we maybe support the pipeline of Black producers to to join these efforts. Any thoughts about that? How we find those growers or how we support them?
In as a part of the Black Farmer Equity Initiative, we've really highlighted by doing equity-based design for the initiative, we heard 3 areas of opportunity to strengthen and invest. So those are access to markets, access to finance, and access to information and technology. And frankly, if you talk to most farmers, that's what they're looking for, right? Any farmer at the top line, those would be the big categories. But what's interesting is sort of what comes underneath that. And so as we think about investing in the pipeline of producers, right? That next gen agriculture, we put that in the information and technology bucket. So so investing in organizations like Manners, or we're working with the 1890s Foundation and several 1890s schools. So those are land grant institutions at historically Black colleges and universities. That can be a way to invest in the future of agriculture, demonstrate that there are new careers in agriculture. You don't have to farm like your parents farmed, that it is a cool and promising career path. So that's one of the things that we're doing. But we're also, the other thing that I think is really a missed opportunity and we'd love to work with partners on is agri-finance. So thinking about how to make agri-finance more equitable and to break through some of the barriers that we've seen specifically for Black farmers and ranchers and growers. So thinking about how do we, build a skin to streamline the USDA process, right? Everybody knows that that's really complicated, but if you're a producer who doesn't have a farm manager, is out doing chores each and every day, like it's really hard to get through some of that. Like it's hard for any farmer to get through the paperwork. It's especially hard if you have been historically excluded from those programs. And there's a lot of broken trust. I can't over emphasize that. I think, judgments like Pickford and others, if you're not aware of that and you want to Google it, like there's lots of evidence based things that have happened that have made some of that financing really difficult. I know one farmer who put in his, not to the bank, he submitted his application for financing to his neighborhood agricultural bank, and due to delays, and he feels like maybe being deprioritized because of his level of acreage and his race, his loan came through so late that he was not able to plant anything this year. So this year is like a complete wash for him and his family, which is, again, I know that other farm families experience this, but when you're just on the edge of being able to keep your multi-generational family operation, it's harmful and damaging. And I think it's some of the reason. We also know there are predatory loans where farmers are being asked to put their houses and other wealth as collateral, because many Black farm families are still banking on cash. They're using their own wealth to keep the family farms. And so again, I know this exists in many other farmer demographics, but I think we see it as more acute, and there's some challenges around banking that I think we could work together to address as we address farm financing. So I'd love partners to come forward to work together on that, because I think there are some really innovative tweaks we could make to already existing systems that would make this work far more inclusive.
And Kelly, I think Kelly and Deanna, I think this is a perfect time to reiterate, this is a all hands on deck mission, because the severity of the issue, but looking at it, standing back and looking at it, it's going to take the entire supply chain to make it work. And so part of that being successful, as you mentioned, Deanna, the finance side of it, access to capital. What are some alternative lending, even, relative to USDA or to an agribank, the ag credit system? What are alternatives there? You mentioned working with Manners. That is great, building up the next generation. But for those individuals that want to go into farming, they need to know and be able to see that they can make a living doing it and that they can be profitable doing it. So showcasing and highlighting those success stories. It's been a long time since we've seen success stories. And so I think that's going to be very integral to making sure that we see successes also.
That leads us into another question. How do we communicate the success? What are Cargill's plans for sharing your work with your consumers in particularly?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a couple of things, Kelly. We have invested in organizations that are telling the story of Black farmers, ranchers, and growers already. So Black Farmer Connect, there's a host of other sort of social properties that are telling this story. We also we work with our teams to share success stories as and where that makes sense. This is just a piece of the work we're doing with farmers, though. So we sort of mix it in with everything else we're doing as we talk about farmers. The other thing that I think is really important is like at that point of sale. So those of you who represent food companies, how can we tell the story? We know that consumers love farmers, and we've got a lot of great farmer stories to tell. And I think social mass balance provides us a really clear opportunity to tell those stories. And so we are working with the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council to certify producers as certified minority suppliers, and many of those farmer stories are ready to tell. We've got farmer partners with the National Black Growers Council. I think there's no shortage of stories. What I think we need to do is really isolate on the individual farm family story and tell those more and more, both through traditional methods, right? I'm really passionate about telling them through traditional Black media as well as mainstream media, highlighting content on our various websites, but then also working with our customers to tell that story in the shopping aisles, on the back of packages. That's where social sustainability really lives. And I think it is a huge untapped possibility that we can really pursue over the next weeks and months and years as we advance this work together. That's where we'll see it grow.
Great, thank you so much. We're approaching the top of the hour. I'm going to launch a quick poll. And so, Seanicaa, as we finish up, are there any last words you'd like to say?
I would. I would like to use this time to reiterate the call to action, but also, for all those that have interest in social mass balance and want to know more about social mass balance, please reach out to me. Reach out to us at Freedmen Heirs. We will be more than happy to set up a call to walk you through the concept of what it could look like. And it can be tailored to some of the social metrics that any business would want to measure. And I would also say, reiterating what Deanna said, all hands on deck. We're welcoming other partners to do this work with us so that we can fully appreciate the journey, but also make it to our adoption goal. At the end of the day, we're in a pilot stage, but we won't stay in pilot stage. And I want to make sure that we get to adoption across the supply chain and not just at the farm gate.
Thank you both so much for sharing this. This is really an exciting development. I know so many of our members are interested in really integrating social aspects and measurement aspects into their supply chain work. This is a great avenue. Also want to let folks know that if you're interested in joining Field to Market or discussing with us our efforts in this space for a more inclusive supply chain, please reach out to me, Kelly Young. My email is available on the website. And also just one more thing, that MANRS is the Minorities in Agriculture and Natural Resources Related Science, MANRRS.org. If you want to check them out and support their programming with the next generation. So thank you both so very much. And thank you to everyone that was able to join us today on this webinar. We look forward to seeing you next month for the next one on social outcomes. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.